recently we had an interview, right? We were interviewing for this role in our organization, leadership, technical, health equity components. And this person came into the Zoom room, it was done virtually, and literally said, "Can you refresh me on this job description? I didn't save my job posting, so I don't know what it's about anymore. You all took it off your website before I could actually download it." Okay. So, yeah, I was pretty shocked to hear that.
You're listening to the Public Health Insight Podcast, your go-to space for all things public health and global health, from the Sustainable Development Goals to the social determinants of health, as well as interesting dialogues about the diverse career opportunities that exist in these fields. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify so other people like you can benefit from our content. Welcome back to another episode of the Public Health Insight Podcast with yours truly, Gordon, and my returning co-host, LaShawn. LaShawn, how's it going?
What's up? I'm back.
We're back to talk about pet peeves as it relates to getting jobs, because both of us are in that position now where we're recruiting and we're hiring people. We're looking at hundreds of job applications, doing lots of interviews. Some of them go well, some of them don't go well. And we serve as each other's sounding boards, right? We kind of call each other to debrief on the various interviews that we've had and job applications that we've seen. And there tends to be very common trends that emerge from ones that leave a mark with us in a not so good way. Would you agree?
That's right. Oh man. Like, I feel like you could create like a funny documentary with some of our experiences of interviewing people.
It's something.
It's quite bizarre what people do. And I feel like there's some sort of mystique around it where maybe people don't really understand the whole interview process and what goes on behind the scenes. And that might be because there's some uncertainty with what to expect sometimes, like how many people are going to be interviewing you, what types of questions are there. Sometimes you might not know the salary and you're trying to figure out what's the best way to approach that. So maybe rightfully so, maybe not. But I think there's things you can do to put the chips in your favor, as they say.
You know what's confusing about, I know we'll get into the matter at hand in a moment, but you know what's confusing to me, LaShawn, is even though we see patterns emerge, it's not like I can narrow it down to say it's early career professionals that struggle the most with it.
Oh gosh.
Or middle. It's all over. Sometimes it's an early career. Sometimes it's someone who's super seasoned.
Gordon.
I don't understand what's going on.
No. So I think that was my latest realization as it comes to interviewing people for jobs. You would think that folks that are just new to this, like you said, are kind of struggling or maybe don't have the experience to show their best self forward during that interview. But I'm talking about seasoned vets out here during interviews, just making very obvious blunders and missteps with the interview. And it's just, I expected better, to be honest. I really did. And I don't want to sound mean or anything, but like, really, Gordon, I mean, I'm seeing some stuff by people who have 20 years on their resume plus making these mistakes. And I'm just like, okay, maybe it's not an experience thing at the end of the day.
Okay. So is it like because the folks who are more seasoned, that they've been in a role for a while and they're out of practice? Like, what? I don't really understand how it could be so flagrantly like bad.
It could be that, and let's put our speculation hats on for a second. But when you said that, I think my mind went to the fact that, hey, maybe these people are very confident in their abilities of in the work that they do. They've been doing it for 20 years.
And they don't prepare.
And they're very confident about that, which is great. It's good to be a certain level of confident when you're coming into one of these, but maybe they're taking that too far and not spending enough time preparing on the other aspects that would be important in today's interview landscape. So maybe that could be a potential reason.
But
I don't know.
So again, I don't want to sound patronizing, but these interviews are scored. Okay.
Yeah.
So you apply, a bunch of people or a few people get an interview, and more or less everyone's at the same level playing field at that point. More or less, like you might have different weightings to the experience part of it and like the resume and cover letter part of it, but more or less the interview is you're now at a level playing field. So it's important to perform well, regardless of how skilled or experienced you are. There's people, like you said, where it's like on paper, yes, amazing fit, and he can't answer the questions. What are you supposed to do?
Yeah. And like, it's funny because you read their cover letter, you read their resume, and they're talking about a lot of cool things that are like, oh, wow, this could fit in the role I'm trying to hire for really well. But then the ball gets dropped somewhere along that interview where you're just like, is this the same person?
All right, let's get into let's get into it, because I think what we're getting at too is like there's multiple layers to it where essentially we're framing this episode around ways not to get a job. So the things that you can do or don't do that will absolutely jeopardize your position to getting the job that you want. And the first place to start usually is you prepare a job application of some sort that involves filling out different forms that are on like an application tracking system or applicant tracking system through a company's website. And then you're uploading your resume and cover letter. So like that's one part. Like one thing that comes to my mind before we get into resumes and cover letters is there are certain positions that require a certain skill set or background.
Yeah.
So for example, there are different roles in the kind of the EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion space, where based on the work and the communities that you'll work with, maybe a specific identity is important. People will apply to a job posting that clearly says must be from X community. And then in the screening question, it says, are you from this community? You say no. Do you understand that your application automatically goes into like decline at that point, right? So that's one way to like, sure, maybe you shouldn't apply in the first place, but understanding that if you do apply, and thank you for being honest, that's good, but then you're not going to be considered, and then you have wasted your time. But I know you have you have takes on the cover letter piece.
I've said this before. I just think that over the last year, I've had the chance to look at hundreds and hundreds of cover letters and resumes. Resumes, fine. Like, I see why people don't feel the need to tailor that as much as they should. So I'll leave that point over there for you to take on. But what I'm talking about is a cover letter. Don't come at me with this generic, hey, I would like to apply to this job X here at this organization. I think I'm really good at this because I have 10 years of experience. And then you go on to say very non-specific things, which has nothing to do about the role. You're telling me you read this job description and you had nothing to add on your cover letter regarding that job description? Not even keywords. Not even that, hey, I'm going to use SPSS in this job, or hey, I'm going to be doing a community assessment, or hey, I'm going to develop resources for external partners and use social media. No. Why isn't that being added in your cover letter? It's so disappointing to see these generic cover letters. Like, come on. Like, think about it. Why even waste your time? Why? You're literally sending this in. Someone's reading it. Do you think we're dumb? Like, seriously though, someone's gonna read this and make a decision. And what do you think the decision is gonna be if you don't put in effort? And I'm just saying what I've experienced so far. And you're comparing that to someone who actually took the time to specifically insert and tailor their cover letter. It's night and day. We're reading hundreds and hundreds of applications. We could see the difference. This shows a lot of effort. It shows commitment. It shows skills that are not even written on the cover letter itself. So please, everyone, spend some time on your cover letter, tailor it a bit, do something. Don't just send a generic cover letter, please.
So I have two rebuttals to that, but I'll start with this one first. Is a generic cover letter worse than none at all?
I honestly, again, it depends on the application pool, but inevitably there will be people who actually tailor it, so it'll stand out way more than this generic letter that you're talking about. You could, so sure.
Wait, are you saying that you'd rather someone not submit anything than submit a generic cover letter?
You could submit it. Like, I think in boxing they say, like, if there's a really seasoned boxer and then there's a rookie boxer coming through for a fight, there's always a puncher's shot at winning, right? You might get a right angle and catch someone off guard. Maybe it happens, right? But I don't think the odds are very high, is what I'm saying with that. Sure, submit it.
Sure.
If it makes you happy, submit it. But don't expect too much from it.
Gives you peace of mind, but doesn't really work in your favor in the other end.
Yeah. What was your second one? Don't try to defend them, Gordon. Just stop. It's not okay. It's not okay. So you could do it. You could submit let me rephrase everything. You could submit this generic cover letter, but just make sure you have healthy expectations of where that's going to land. That's all I got to say.
Here. Well, no, what I was going to say is for the cover letter, right? Folks might say, I'm applying to a lot of jobs. I don't have time to tailor it. Why are you laughing? That's not a good excuse?
Don't apply to the jobs then. Like, quality over quantity. Yeah. Take the time. I honestly, that's a pet peeve of mine. I hear people on LinkedIn saying, I sent thousands of applications. How do you, in my whole life, I don't think I've ever sent even close to 1,000 applications. I spend a lot of time on applications to make sure they're good and well-intentioned and land well. Thinking about those different factors that we're going to get into today. Are you well-researched? Are you showing your commitment and passion? So I don't even know how long 1,000 resumes would take and cover letters would take to complete. But I could see how easy it is if you're clicking the apply all button on LinkedIn and applying to every single job generically that you're seeing. Like, I could probably, during this podcast, apply to... There's not an apply all button. There's an apply button on LinkedIn. But like, I'm saying within this podcast time while we're recording, I could probably apply to 20 jobs with my LinkedIn profile and say, hey, Gordon, I applied to 20 jobs today. No, you didn't. Don't kid yourself.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So, I mean, at the end of the day, moving on from cover letters, I guess the moral of the story from my perspective is, yes, quality game, but if you're doing a volume game, it must be within scope of like a specific thing. So if you're applying to, if your area of expertise is knowledge mobilization and you're applying to 100 knowledge mobilization jobs, I would expect minimal tailoring that's required if you already have a baseline to work off of. But if you're applying to things that are all over the map and you're not tailoring your resume, you could look quite silly. And luckily, you're not seeing the face of the reviewers when they're reviewing your application, fortunately for you.
Yeah. And to wrap up that section on resumes and cover letters, I will say, let me take a step back one more time.
You going to walk it back?
For a second. No, not too much. But there are people who do apply to many, many jobs, and they are well-intentioned, and they do take the time. And there's other factors, sometimes out of their control, that might come into play. So there is a percentage of people who actually do send out a lot of resumes well-intentioned, and they're just not hearing back.
Yeah, they're just not hearing back. Or the strike score is fairly low.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, you better make sure you have a damn good resume. It better
Damn
be a
good
damn
resume.
I've seen some of those too, like where the cover letter is not up to par, but they kind of make up for it a little bit with the resume. But if your resume is not happening and the cover letter is not happening, yeah, good luck. This is not even this kind of saddest part in this whole how to not get a job story. No,
It's not?
because at least with the paper, it's impersonal. It's like you're making a judgment and an impression based on words that are on sheets of paper or not.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
gets more tricky when you actually see the person, see how they approach things, how they carry themselves, right? So
Yep.
in the next stage of the process, if you were fortunate to get an interview, whether it was through quality cover letters or resumes or doing like a volume game and then maybe you got lucky or maybe someone potentially saw something in you, then you get to this interview stage. So we have lots of stories to talk about how to not get a job or how to absolutely tank an interview before you really even start opening your mouth. And
Yeah.
the first most off-putting thing, LaShawn, is around like,
Yeah.
hey, what's this job for again? Like people actually show up to interviews and more or less ask that question. And and if you had the interview booked for an hour or 90 minutes, you know it's going to be a long ride after that one.
Oh my gosh. Yo,
Oh, over
like,
to you.
I don't know. Maybe I'm more bitter these days. I don't know what it is. Well, what's the word, Gordon? How do you explain my
Cynical?
demeanor? Yeah, there we go. I feel like I'm more cynical these days as it comes to interviews. But okay, recently we had an interview, right? We were interviewing for this role in our organization, leadership, technical, health equity components. And this person came into the Zoom room, is done virtually, and literally said, "Can you refresh me on this job description? I didn't save my job posting, so I don't know what it's about anymore. You all took it off your website before I could actually download it." Okay. So, yeah, I was pretty shocked to hear that. Like,
Did
wow.
it take all you
What a
had to
first-
muster up the, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt still to get through the interview? Or were you done at that point?
It's funny. I mean, obviously you have to stay professional, but like inside of me, I'm just like, oh wow, did this really happen? Like you hear it sometimes of, yeah, these are some of these missteps that happen during interviews, but to actually experience one of those moments, I was in shock, to be honest. I was like, whoa. But yeah, that did happen. It did.
Okay, let me play
happen.
devil's advocate quickly.
Yeah.
Do you recall for that interview the turnaround time from when the interview happened from when the person was notified that they were being offered an interview?
Regardless, if it's a day or two, usually it's a week, your best bet is to just email HR during that kind of talk back when you're figuring out the interview timing and just say, hey, do you mind sending over a copy of the role description again? Name it. Just say
Name
it.
it. Yeah.
It's way better than actually going to the
Yeah.
actual interview and asking
true.
that. Be proactive about it. Like I have no sympathy for those people who just do that. Like I'm dead serious. And like you know some emergency situations come up. That's a
Right.
different thing. But the general run of the mill interview, like no.
Yeah, you got to. Yeah, you're right. You have to communicate. It's embarrassing, but you have to communicate about it beforehand. Like because
It's not that bad if you
because
do it
there's several.
beforehand.
Your
It's-
computer
yeah.
could have got fried. You know, maybe you
Yeah.
didn't think you would
It's not
get
that bad.
it. There's many different reasons, but you can't show up to the interview with that type of energy. You just,
Yeah. Anyways, the take-home message for that one is save your job descriptions as soon as you apply.
but not only
for that
save
job.
them, read them.
Read
read
them,
them.
save them, do whatever you want with them.
Yeah,
Just have it.
You got to read it. You got to know what you're interviewing for. That's rule number one. And if you don't, you got to wing it at that point. You cannot say
Yeah.
that you don't know
Well, okay, so that's where I think we need to talk a bit more about, because I don't think it should be winged either. So I think
how do you
I
say it?
think I think a solid way to, if you didn't do your due diligence, you don't
Right,
have the
okay, I
job
know where you're
description,
going.
you're in the interview, it makes sense to be like, hey, I would appreciate if you could just give me a little overview of the job description once again, just so we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Leave it at that. Don't say, oh, you took it off your website and I didn't have a chance to do X, Y, Z. No. It's okay as a second
Yeah.
option to do exactly that, but don't blame the
Right.
interviewers and the
Right.
company.
That's a good point.
So yeah, I wouldn't
Okay,
wing
fair
it,
enough.
to be honest, Gordon. Like that's
All right,
that's
fair
not
enough.
it.
And yeah, so you need the posting, you need to know about the company, you need to know about your role, and
Know about the company? That's a different
I
story.
mean, let's
my
talk about it. I
gosh.
mean, knowing about the company doesn't even rely on you having the job posting. So what's the excuse for that one?
Yeah. Oh man. I think at this point, if you're listening to this podcast, you should realize that there are a couple of generic questions you should always anticipate. One of them is, tell me about yourself. The second one might be along the lines of, why are you applying to this job? Another one might be, what do you know about this organization? And this happened recently. We asked this question in one of these interviews that we were doing for an organization I work for. And we asked, hey, so tell us what you know about our organization. I mean, you applied, like you spent this time doing a resume, cover letter, you passed those stages. You're here in person for this interview. You must be passionate about something that we're doing. Let's hear it. Like, what do you like? What did you hear about our organization? What are some of the services and things that we do? Well, actually, I looked at the website. I didn't find too much information, so I don't know too much about it. Yeah, that's literally how they answered the question.
That sounds
Literally.
like Kawhi's press conference when we signed him. He's like, "What do you do for fun?" And he's like, "I don't know where you're sitting at."
You're just gonna have to ask more questions and get to know me. But yeah, so do not do that. Prepare for that one. It's nice that you say in your response that you're passionate about the work we do, but tell us about the work we do. What kind of things did you read about? And it doesn't have to be super, super detailed. You could be like, hey, like, I know you do social services. I know you do healthcare services. I know you do different services that address the social determinants of health. Like very general is better than just saying, I don't know.
Maybe
I don't know.
Maybe the website was just terrible, Sean.
Yeah, no, I'm not giving that one
It's
to
not
them.
searchable.
No way.
Come on, make your website more navigable.
I'm not. Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
you're
I'm not
gonna
giving them this
let
one.
that one go.
But I don't know, just take some time. Why are you applying to an organization? Why did you spend your hard-earned free time to not care enough to look into the organization you're applying for?
I'm surprised you remembered the time of the interview.
Yeah. No, for real though. Like that's, I don't know. Anyways.
So you get someone who knows about the organization, who knows about the role a
Yeah.
little bit, and then
Yeah.
you're like, okay,
Yeah.
this is going well, right? And then you start getting into the questions to assess their competency at what
Yep.
the role entails, right? So, you know,
It's a funny
there's
one,
there's
yeah.
different components of that too. Like, some people, I think you had some examples, LaShawn, of even just from a limiting distractions perspective and maintaining professionalism. There's
Yeah.
people taking the interview in their car. I think you had someone
yeah.
walking around, like doing stuff as
Yeah.
they were interviewing you with like a shaky
You know how
screen
you-
moving around.
Yeah. Someone was holding their phone like like they're taking a selfie, and that was the angle, and walking around throughout their interview. Yeah. Man.
Is it on us as recruiters, hiring managers, to lay out all the rules and like what we expect in an interview? Like, don't join. We don't
Yeah.
want you to join on your phone
Yeah.
unless you're gonna give a really genuine thing that, yeah, my laptop won't turn on, or you know what I mean? Is it on
So,
us to
yeah,
like
I think
communicate
that's-
that, or is there some like unspoken etiquette?
Yeah. I feel like there is unspoken etiquette, but I think a lot of people, especially in the public health space, do give grace for those situations that aren't expected, right? And that's totally fine. But if you have the option, LaShawn strongly recommends that you find a quiet, reasonable spot to have that interview done. And if it means going to the library, if it means going to your friend's house or a quiet cafe, I don't know. I think there are better options than holding your phone up as a selfie and moving around and yeah.
So you compose yourself as the interviewer, as these folks
Yeah.
are walking around with their phone and you're seeing various settings and backgrounds,
And it's distracting
Getting
for us too, right?
distracted.
It's not just it's just not.
like fighting to be taken seriously, trying to talk over the noise in the background, doing all that. So you're like, all right, we have to get through the interview out of the sake of courtesy. And then you start asking questions. You start asking,
Yeah.
hey, tell us about how you developed this program, or what's your experience in this and what's your experience in that. And what are some of the types of bad responses you get to those types of questions?
So this is going back to what I was saying at the beginning when you have 20-year veterans in like a particular field in public health and the resume cover letter past this point. They have great experience. Let me tell you about a time where we were hiring for some sort of health equity, health communication role. So a lot of writing, communication strategies. And, you know, I thought I nailed down this person and found a really great potential interview.
And that's based on paper,
Really
what
great.
you've seen so far.
Based on paper, and you see all these lovely projects that they've been a part of, all the organizations they've been part of, all their leadership attributes and
Slam
their
dunk.
outcomes. Yeah, it was like, wow, like the possibilities of them joining our team and the skill set they could bring to complement what we had going on was immense,
Yeah.
right? And so you ask them the question, like you ask them some questions that maybe are not in line with the communication background. So you're kind of like, okay, like maybe they can't really answer the preventative side of public health, the health literacy, health promotion type questions as well. Okay, let's hold on to that. But then you get to the questions where we're actually talking about the communication strategies and how to best reach different target populations. And you're expecting this is where
Bread and
this
butter.
is it. This is where it's gonna happen. This is it, right? And you get the most generic non-response response ever. Like you're expecting to hear very detailed, specific experiences drawn in, but no, it was very at the surface, and I didn't get anything from it. It's almost like they rephrased the question, and they were talking about the question stem itself and not the response to the question.
So what does that look? It's
And-
something like, I think I've heard them so many times too, where it's like, yeah, I have lots of experience in that, you know, it's
Yeah.
a big part of my work, you know, and we do a lot of communication, so it's important, it's very important to accomplishing our goals, and yeah,
That's right.
And
That's
it's like-
exactly it. That's exactly it.
okay,
So this is where I take a step back, right? And I'm like, okay, is it a nervousness thing? Is it a I'm not understanding the question thing? Is it a combination of both? Is it I actually think that I'm answering the question the way it's supposed to be answered? So when an interviewer is reading a question to you, and now it's nice because they actually sometimes put in the chat so you could reread it, or they share a screen and they have questions on the screen. They're doing that for a reason, for you to just take your time, really understand the question. don't answer a question that you don't understand. Please. It'll become so apparent and obvious. Take your time, ask for confirmation. Is this what you're trying to get at? And again, if you don't know the question, that's okay too. And if you don't have a good response, that's good too. I wouldn't personally say I don't know, but I like what Gordon usually says. And he's kind of talked me through this a bit in terms of you might not know the response, but think about from the interviewer's perspective, why are they asking this specific question? What is the importance of them knowing the response to this question? So if you're even able to highlight the importance of the question, so if they're asking about communication styles and tailoring communication, you could use just your general knowledge to answer why that question is important. So communication strategies that are tailored to specific populations are important because we know that different populations and communities have different communication needs and styles. Some communities might not use social media as others. So maybe you need to have face-to-face communication. Maybe you need to have posters, in-person sessions. Maybe for another community, maybe it's social media and they're more tech savvy and they love their phones and they love internet and they love virtual webinars, right? There's going to be differences. So can you talk to them? Can you at least map out a plan of, hey, okay, maybe I don't know their preferences at all, which is oftentimes the case. Talk about a strategy to understand those preferences. Maybe it's a focus group. Maybe you want to do some sort of community assessment. Maybe you want to do a survey to understand those needs so you could better tailor those communication strategies to reach those specific populations. Having some insight, like notice that I didn't really answer the question, but I tried walking through some of the things I would do to understand that and highlight the importance of it. So you could also take it that way and it'll show your kind of reasoning and thought patterns behind how you would approach it. If you are going to be hired for this job, this is what you're going to be doing.
And even what you just shared there is highlighting how important it is to understand the job posting. Yeah. Because what you said there connects back to understanding the job posting as well. Because then in your response too, you then connect it and say, yeah, in this role, a key part is developing content. And if it was me, I would make sure I do all these steps in place, have inclusive community, blah, 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 blah. And like you said, you really haven't added too much of substance there, but you're showing that you understand that there's a challenge associated with that question and what the expectations are in your role. And they're getting an inkling into your thought process just from you kind of vocalizing that.
Yeah. And I will add another fun, quick fact here. Maybe not a fact, more of a tip. Instead of saying, I don't know, like you'd be surprised how many people say, I don't know. Like maybe we'll go to the next question and come back. Maybe the response that's more positively framed is, hey, I do have a bit of experience in this area, but I'm really keen on learning more from the team and learning more on how I could develop these skills. I really pride myself on, lifelong learning, and things I love doing is, teaching myself more about topics I don't know. And you could mention, hey, like I love watching YouTube tutorials or different tutorials on different evidence-informed websites that will help me get to where I need to be at to offer this skill or skill set or this responsibility in a good way. So even though you don't necessarily answer the question, you're highlighting yourself as someone who's proactive and willing to learn rather than saying, oh, I don't know. Oh, well.
Yeah, I would even say the part that you just added should come after an attempt to answer the question. Because, folks, you have to remember, these things are scored. The moment you skip one or two questions, it's over. It's really over, right? So you really have to consider those pieces. And I know you had another example too, and we don't have to get into it too much, but when someone kind of pulls up their paper notes and shuffling it in front of the screen, looking for an answer to a question, and then proceeding to read it off verbatim from what the paper says.
Yeah. You said it there.
That's a bit
nailed
weird.
It. That's happened before. And you could have notes. Like you could have general notes. You could take down notes while you're going through the interview process. But don't be so blatant and bring papers and shuffle in front of the
but it
mic
was like,
and the screen. Where,
let me find it.
Yeah, it's like page
it's
one.
not here. I think
maybe
it's
on this page. Like,
back. And like
Nah.
using the use your
Mm-mm.
inside voice, you know? Like you don't
Yeah.
you don't want to think out loud.
Yeah. Don't narrate
Right.
everything
And I
you're
know we know
doing,
you're
I would
nervous,
say.
but
Yeah.
it's cringy to go through it like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see your face, man. You're not impressed right now. You're getting memories. And then before we go to the end, one of mine pet peeves that's a little bit weird is when someone will say something like, "Hey, did I answer the question?" Or
Oh yeah.
"What question do you want me to give more things on?" So
Yeah.
at the surface, it's a bit of an innocent question, but you have to understand that there can be some inequalities there. If you're doing like 5 interviews and then someone is afforded the luxury of knowing that more details were required on top of their initial response, and then saying that and then not giving everybody that opportunity. So that's why you'll often see in many interviews, they never really follow up and say, "Hey, could you give more detail on that?" Sometimes if it was a really, really high level response, or you actually answered a completely different question based on a misunderstanding that they wanted to clarify, that they'll kind of re-ask it again. But in general, you got to use different cues like washing the head nods and like different things like that to know if you're on track, or if they look serious or disengaged, or if they stop writing, you know that you're not really on track anymore. But they're not going to really say, "Hey, yeah, no, you provided enough detail. Thank you." Or "That was a great response. Thank you." That's not typically what to expect. So winding it down to the end, I think there's some things that can leave a bad taste in the mouth, even if you had a strong performance in an interview, even when the interview is done and you're kind of wrapping up the call. And one of them examples I got from you, LaShawn, is someone who wanted some advice on another position that they were considering and how it would fit or align or be compatible with this interview. So essentially they wanted advice on how to juggle the two together if they were offered. And that was a very cringy position for you to be in.
Yeah, very, very, very. Like, you shouldn't be talking about other jobs that you're in or other offers that you have on the table, unless there's a very good reason to do it. But if you're just trying to find some advice, I think they were just going back and forth on their current job and, hey, maybe I do want to leave it and take this job full time. I don't know, like, I don't know what to do, but what do you think? Yeah, like, should I take it? Like, no, like, why are you asking us? And the funny thing is, they were talking like they got this job that they're interviewing for currently, when in fact they were not a good candidate at all from the very beginning. So it's kind of, it's funny.
All right, folks, there you have it. We could go on and on and on, but you just heard us talk about some of the red flags or immediate pet peeves or ways to kind of essentially screw yourself out of a job. And we strongly recommend that you try to avoid these missteps or mishaps in your interviews. That's and encourage your colleagues to do so too. Sometimes you have your friends or your colleagues who you probably suspect they could improve on something, but they're too shy to ask. Bring them in for a mock interview, give them your honest opinion, and be good colleagues in that sense. Right?
Absolutely.
Everyone can improve. I think just to close it out, I think you and me, LaShawn, are self-aware in the sense of we've done presentations that are recorded. We do podcasts that are recorded. And we sometimes hear ourselves back and like we'll cringe. Like, wow, that was terrible. But if you don't have anyone, we give ourselves feedback because we watch it back. But if you're doing interviews, it's not recorded. The interviewers aren't really giving you feedback. So you have no way of even knowing how well you're performing. So doing mock interviews is a good way to get an honest opinion on how you perform. And there's no other way to get that than like if you actually ask someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Google and LinkedIn have
cool
like
features.
some AI interview stuff now that you could just
please,
practice.
especially if you're not getting job offers, please do that. All right, This is Gordon and LaShawn signing off until you hear us again next time. Peace.
See ya.
This show was edited by me, Gordon Thane, with additional editing from LaShawn Benedict. Sound design and mixing by myself and LaShawn Benedict. The original music from The Music Room, composed by Tom Fox, licensed from Johnny Harris. The cover art designed for our show by LaShawn Benedict. The Public Health Insight Podcast is produced by PHI Media. Thank you for listening to the Public Health Insight Podcast, your go-to space for informative conversations, inspiring community action. If you enjoy our podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. See you in the next one.